6:33. Start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, move on to roll call. Yerk here, Wolf.
Here.
Hall.
Here.
Spence.
Here.
Hamel.
Here.
Witt.
Here.
Albers.
Here.
All right, we have actually a full commission and a quorum. Also noting that we have our planner, Lord Preps, in attendance. Approval of the agenda. Are there any changes, corrections to the agenda?
I mean, I don't know if we want to talk about the CREO, if we want to add that to a formal discussion. I don't know how the commission feels about it.
That's something we could discuss as part of the,
Yeah, that's all part of renewables.
Okay.
under item 7A. Yeah, that's fine. All right. Any other comments or additions or changes? Hearing none, I'd entertain a motion. Motion by Commissioner Hamel.
I'll second it.
Support by Commissioner Spence. That's to approve. Yerk, yes. Wolf.
Yes.
Hall.
Yes.
Spence.
Yes.
Hamel.
Yes.
Witt.
Yes.
Albers.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously. Approval of minutes from the September 18th, 2024 regular meeting. Are there any changes or corrections to the minutes?
I have a correction.
Yes, Commissioner Wolf.
What I've noticed, I went back to 2022, and the minutes are being recorded as drafts and also as agendas, not actual meetings under the title. And I think that needs to be corrected, at least going forward, including today. So when you have a meeting, it's no longer an agenda. An agenda is what you're going to discuss. So if you look at, I actually brought, if you need to look at it, some are marked, it says draft on them. Some are marked draft agenda, and those are our final approved minutes. So I'd like to see that the minutes are reflected as actual minutes.
All right, you noted that some of this goes back to 2022?
It goes actually back to 2020, of May 18 was the last time. It doesn't have that. So it goes back 4 years. Sometimes it said it was draft, other times it's called it an agenda, but it never just calls it minutes of the meeting.
Okay. Said,
Goes back to May 18, 2020, that was the last correction.
all right, well, we would have to do,
I don't know if we're allowed to correct minutes since they're approved, or have to go back and reapprove all the actual minutes.
I don't
that
think
change.
you would go back and reapprove them all. We just need to start here, from here, and go further. There's already approved.
yeah,
There's nothing, I mean, the written minutes are the formal action of what happened at the meeting. So once they're approved, that's it.
okay. Well, then I would note that this month, the minutes do list the term agenda at the top, so I guess we suggest that we make that correction for this month and then going
Yeah, and
forward.
in the past, it would say minute meetings, and then it lists our township and what was done.
So in lieu of where it says agenda, it should say meeting minutes. All right. Is there any other changes or corrections? Hearing none and noting that that correction, is there a motion to approve?
I'll move.
Motion Motion by Commissioner Wolf, is there support?
Support.
Support by Commissioner Witt. Yerk, yes. Wolf?
Yes.
Hall?
Yes.
Spence?
Yes.
Hamel?
Yes.
Witt?
Yes.
Albers?
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously. All right, next item, 6A, public hearings. We have none, so we'll move on to business item 7A, renewable energy ordinance.
So you have a clean copy of what was provided to you as far as the solar and energy storage facilities ordinance last month. Really, this is the current large energy solar, or large solar energy system.
Trustee Hall, Commissioner Deal with I'm sorry.
It's okay. We have one conversation. Let's talk about it.
No, it's just something that I
found
should have
something?
spoke up earlier and I didn't speak up.
Oh, wow. So this large solar energy systems was just updated to include the battery storage facilities. Once, if you're comfortable with this, I mean, I guess that's one conversation. And then I know that Joe had provided some minor changes that were talked about as far as the wind energy systems ordinance draft also. After the meeting, there was I was kind of surprised that Joe kind of felt that from the conversation, he thought that you wanted to do large scale or utility scale nameplate ordinance. This was written specifically as accessory and to be more restrictive than that. Primarily because, one, we don't have an ordinance at all now, and we haven't been approached by any wind that I'm aware of. And we're pretty far inland, and so I don't know that that's an option for Washtenaw County communities. I know none of them have been approached that I'm aware of. And then, we still could talk about the CREO. I know that's a conversation I think we need to have. So since I wasn't here last month, I just want to make sure you had time to review this and that the corrections you expected to be made were made. And then I guess we can talk about the CREO or whatever other topics you wanted to talk about the renewable energy.
Okay, before we do that, I just want, for clarification, related to the utility scale wind, what you're indicating is it's currently not allowed in the township.
Not allowed, no.
So therefore, there's really no, and if we don't want to allow it, then there's no need for us to go into trying to create an ordinance for it, which would then allow it on
Right.
some scale.
Right.
All right,
Whether
so-
it's in an overlay district or whether it's in a by zoning, yes.
Okay, all right.
Where, like, is that a township bylaw, or is that,
It's not a use that's allowed in our ordinance, so it's not allowed.
oh,
If it's not listed in the ordinance explicitly, then it's a use
not
that's not,
allowed, right.
it's not allowed.
and no company could come in and challenge that?
It can, but that would be up to the township to challenge at that point in time. I mean, there's no way a township can have every single possible use and law. I mean, there's uses that aren't, that maybe aren't acceptable for Augusta Township, right? Like, for example, we're not off a freeway, so if we had a zoning classification for a Costco or some other large retailer, they're not gonna, it's not gonna happen here, because we just don't have the draw. We don't have the infrastructure, like the road, the visibility from a major road, et cetera. So we don't list it in our ordinance, it's not allowed. But it's because there's probably no viability for it either, so.
What about private windmills where they have pumps, for irrigation and things like that?
Well,
Do we have that?
We don't have that, and that's
So-
that's what this new wind.
Okay, you don't think anybody in one of these old houses has an old
I don't know
pump
if
with a
they-
windmill? I'm just
they
saying,
might.
would they be in violation?
No, if it's existing, it's grandfathered in, right? This would be for new,
I understand,
yep.
yeah.
There is some windmills, but people mostly have them hooked to their ponds, dump the water.
Right.
But you're saying that we don't need a wind ordinance, or?
I'm saying, yeah, I mean, you don't have to adopt a wind ordinance if you don't want to. I think what we've provided is for accessory type wind. So if a farmer wanted to use wind instead of solar arrays, they could put up a small wind, antenna, not called antennas, but a system, that would produce power to a battery, right? And then they could use it for their pond irrigation, they could use it for a generator for their home, if the power were to go out. So that's what this ordinance was meant to cover.
So that's my bad, because I thought that that's what we were talking about was large scale at the last meeting. I did not read it, like I knew some of it was personal based on the language, but I thought it also covered large scale. And maybe I'm just being like Wendy Worrier, because I feel like we didn't have a solar ordinance because we didn't think it was necessary, and then we got into the mess that we got into.
Actually, we did have a solar ordinance
Well,
during all
even though it says I wasn't here last time, but, but I thought we did talk about both, and I thought we were gonna combine them both together. I thought that's what the conversation was, we were gonna combine them both together.
That's
Well, we-
what, yeah, well, either that or we'd have two separate ones, but I think in an effort to try to be thorough or I don't know, way to, describe it, we were, through unintended consequences, we're actually creating something that doesn't exist here and that we don't want to exist here. So
Right.
if it's not a use that's allowed, which is the way the ordinance is used, then it's not, if it's not listed as an acceptable use, then it's not allowed. So if we don't create an ordinance, then it's still not allowed, so we're not changing anything. But related to what we're talking about, what we are talking about, which is listed as 6.26, the wind energy systems. Would this cover someone that has a pond that uses a windmill for aeration as well?
So I don't know enough about that. I mean, this would be for an accessory use wind energy system, and you have to have 10 acres, and it has to be an accessory use, and, I mean, these are all the parameters. I don't know if what that is different from what this, I just don't know the technology, like, I don't know if there's any difference.
Yeah, I mean, the ones I've seen look more like a
Like-
traditional windmill, with the rotary part with a vane on the end. And
Right.
it just aerate, it agitates the water to aerate it, keep it from.
Yeah, I don't think that's
getting
not
weedy or
conducting
whatever.
electric, that's not an
No,
electric,
no.
and I think that's the difference,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Okay. All right, Wendy, did you have more you wanted to talk about then?
Well, I mean, I don't know if I got copies of, so what a lot of townships are doing that have legal representation, or a legal firm represents them from a planning and law perspective, they seem to be adopting a CREO, but then they've created an energy overlay district, which basically means within that district, it aligns with the state guidelines, and we've met our criteria for what the state law has currently passed, right? And then everything outside of that district would fall under our ordinances that we've created. And there's also like for townships that haven't, I think most in the state have probably gone through this exercise already, but in terms of adopting ordinances. But there's mathematical calculations that will tell a township, based on the number of homes they have, how much acreage would be needed to support the state's goal in a carbon neutral plan in 2030. And I roughly did that calculation for Augusta Township, and what we've got for the rail splitter 1 and 2 is more than, like, it's almost like 7 times what we really need in a township. So we should be, we should met, like I think Laura brought up, we've met our obligations more so, and how could really anyone in the state support us having to have more built here, because we've met those up. So I don't know, I'll defer to the board and to Laura on what you guys want to do, if you want to adopt a CREO. I know that I was of the opinion that that just makes it easy for the state, and why make things easy? But then over the weekend, I talked to another person in a different township, and that's kind of the position they're taking. So it's like 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. And then with this recent development that I shared with you this afternoon, you know, the whole thing could be overturned if the courts agree with the townships. So I defer to.
Yeah, I mean, the same thing with the townships we represent the majority of Washtenaw County. Now I would say half are doing Creo and half aren't. But that's dependent upon, also their legal representation. I mean, I've asked 3 attorneys and I get 3 different answers what they think the best course of action is. You know, if you were to do a Creo and do an overlay, I think all you have to do is show that your overlay is where Hill Splitter already is.
Mhm.
I mean, so, again, it's a lot of work and, I mean, we can do it, but for what? I mean, it's only allowing it where it already is. So, and there's nothing in the law that says we have to adopt the Creo. It's just saying, if you adopt a Creo, you have to, it can't be more restrictive than the state.
Well, that was the other question I had, because I know that with the judgment consent that the township worked through with Rail Splitter, and you guys got further setbacks, that I didn't know if that would make that null and void to what we've already done and established for the township, if those things, because those things apply to, and would apply if we created a green energy district, because that's where Rail Splitter would be, if that would make those things null and void, you know what I mean?
Well, the ordinance calls for those enlarged setbacks now. Our ordinance says those enlarged setbacks.
Right.
So if a development were to come in and say, forget the state, we don't even want to deal with them, we want to deal with you, they'd have to meet all the same requirements that Rail Splitter already did. Because we changed our ordinance based upon those
Right.
larger setbacks and whatever.
Okay.
So they'd have to get conditional use approval, they might have to get rezoning of property, then they have to get conditional use approval. So, you know, I don't think that, I honestly don't think that we're gonna see more development in Augusta Township, but for the sake of, being safe, you know, whatever you're comfortable with, I think that's what we should do. But just because the state law says you have to have a Creo, doesn't mean we have to do it.
Mhm.
That's the main thing. And there's nothing that I've seen that says for sure that the state's gonna the state is gonna say, well, if you have an overlay, that's considered a workable ordinance. They haven't said that we can say where things can be located yet, right? No one's challenged it. And so we can say, well, we have a Creo, but we have this overlay. They might say that's more restrictive than the Creo, and so it doesn't apply. I mean, we don't know because it hasn't been challenged.
Well, the overlay, that's the point I'm trying to make. The overlay would include the Creo. It would be that. And everything outside of that.
But nothing in the state law says that a Creo can dictate where these are located. So by
Right,
saying
exactly.
it's an overlay, I'm saying, so the state could come back, if it's challenged, the state could say, we never said in the act you township could could create an overlay or tell us what zoning districts this could be in. So it doesn't matter what you say. They can be anywhere.
But it also, right, but it doesn't say that, so it could be determined, it's logical and reasonable to say that the township has done, they've met everything, because look at this, based on the size of the township there and the megawatts needed to power homes, they only really needed 112 acres, but now they've got over 600 that are being used for solar.
Right, but what I guess
I
what
think we're saying the same thing.
I think we're saying the same thing,
Okay.
but what I'm saying is, we don't need a Creo to say that.
Okay.
We can have our own ordinance that says this is where we allow them, these are the setbacks that we have created, this is the type of fencing we want, this is the landscaping. And so, state, we don't need a Creo, we don't need to do that, because we already have an ordinance that we're comfortable with. And if somebody wants to come to us, they can do that. And if they don't wanna meet our ordinances, then they can go through the state, and the residents can be angry at the state for allowing something that we don't, aside from what we want in our township.
Right, because when we revised the solar ordinance, we took it out of AR, so it's restricted now to GI and LI, which is a very small part of the zoning in the township.
Which not much is left, because a lot of that was taken up by the solar.
Right, right.
Yeah.
So we've already in effect, restricted the amount of area in the township.
Yes.
Now, is there, because I'm not familiar with this, so that's why I'm asking, as far as a township's obligation to meet the state's desire for whatever it is, 40% of energy to be from a renewable source. In other words, I mean, say somebody decides, well, we're gonna cover 36 square miles of a township with solar panels, and that'll get us there. So this township is gonna provide for the whole state. Is there something that prevents that? Like along the lines of what Commissioner Albers is referring to?
I
In
don't
other
think
words,
so,
that-
and I don't know that townships necessarily have to commit to the state's carbon neutrality goal, right? I mean, I don't know, I mean, the Washtenaw County has a carbon neutrality goal, I know Scioto Township has bought into that, and they have their own carbon neutrality plan and ways that they think that they can get to do their part. But I don't know that townships they're not required to do any of that. I mean, it's a goal of the state. I mean,
I feel like if I was reading between the lines of the, what I was being told this weekend about Creo, I feel like showing the state, if something were to come in, like if a developer wanted to come in, they could point to, you know, their overlay district, say, look, we've more than met our obligation to anything, go put the panels in another township that hasn't had 600 acres taken from them. That's what I think a lot of people are doing, but again, you
yeah, and
know.
I think it's very easily for us to say, we don't even need an overlay. We can say, no, look what we have, right?
Yeah, I just don't know how, like, I don't know what you need to do in order to protect yourself if it went to litigation or anything.
But if we said no, then they could challenge it in court.
Again, that's why, I mean, any ordinance that we are, you know, that we
Even
talk about in
when-
draft has to go to the township attorney to vet. So that's why I'm trying to get to a point where we're comfortable, so that we can get this to Vic, so that he can vet it. But like I told you, I've talked to Vic about this, I've talked to other attorneys that I work with, and they all kind of have a little bit different, they're all gonna have a little different take, and they're all gonna have a little different opinion. And then it comes down to the township, and how comfortable the township board is, and the planning commission is, with language that may be challenged. And, I mean, that's with any ordinance or with anything, you have to decide, well, nope, we're willing to, you know, this is what our rules are, and we're willing to take a chance to see if somebody challenges it.
I guess maybe, like, I've been swayed because I keep hearing how Foster Swift is like the #1 law firm in the state for municipal law. And they're the law firm that I think has, you know, that developed this, that it is endorsing an energy, like an overlay energy district. And so that's why, like, I keep being drawn to that because of their standing and their knowledge about the solar and all of that.
Mhm.
So I have, any of the lawyers you spoke to, were they part of that law firm?
Nope, none of the townships I represent have
Okay. I think they might be more like Lansing and further north.
Yeah, and they're probably bigger communities too, so probably pretty expensive.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, this is your ordinance. There's no wrong answer, right? And honestly, you know, even if we work on a Creo, it looks like there's gonna be litigation, whether, you know, so then it becomes to a point where, okay, how far do you wanna go to see what happens with the litigation? Do we wanna continue to work on this and get something adopted? Are we concerned that we don't have, you know, that we wanna move this forward? Or are we comfortable because we have a large solar facility already? We wanna wait and see what happens with this. So that's another, it's just, you know, big picture question that we need to talk about. Because we can press forward, but I hate to move too forward and do a lot of work and take a lot of time, and then we have to regroup and we adopt something we didn't really want in the first place, and then we have to undo it.
Well, I mean, at a minimum, I personally feel like we should at least adopt the solar with the battery storage wording included in it, at a minimum. And then, I digress to everybody else and what you feel.
Now, you talking large scale, or you talking just the average homeowner too?
No large scale battery. But what we talked about and covered last month was
Okay.
the small wind.
I wasn't here, I don't know.
You were in Mexico. I swear you were gone.
That's for the DOT meeting.
The only information that's really missing from, the energy storage facility is the definitions, and I'll bring those back with you at the public hearing. They're what's provided in the act that we would have to, they're the same definitions that, are in the state act. So, I mean, the next step would be, if you're comfortable with the battery storage added to the large scale solar and the accessory wind, would be to set up a public hearing at this level. And then, at that time, I would send these to Vic, so that hopefully he could vet them and give us any feedback before a public hearing. And then, we would discuss them, and then at some point that you're comfortable, you would recommend them to the board, and then they would take them off for you.
So these are examples from Deerfield, in case you're interested to read some of what they've got in terms of battery storage and wind.
So just so I got clarification in my own mind, Laura, does this, let's just say solar wants to add on another 600 acres. I mean, can we still say, well, we've met our obligation? I mean,
Well, you'd have to say, is it zoned industrial? And if it's not, they have to ask for a rezoning, and then we have to say, well, in our master plan, it's not, that doesn't coordinate with our master plan. So you can deny the rezoning.
but they can still come in on the land that we've already put aside for future solar.
What do you mean?
The
I mean,
EQ property, I mean, you know.
They could, yeah, they could come on that property.
Okay.
That's the only property.
And then that's, well, because it's zoned that, I don't know if having an overlay district would preclude more solar from going in there, because we would be able to say, look, we've met, with the current rail splitter 1 and 2, like we've more than met. Unless the township wanted it for whatever reason to develop that, I would think you'd want, if anything was gonna go on the EQ, I would think you'd want something more diverse and that might help the tax base.
Commissioner Albers, can I ask, and in your interpretation of saying that we've met it, and the way you're calculating it, is there something in the state ordinance that they adopted that says that, or is it that in order to meet
I
the
think-
40% goal, we need X number of megawatts, and somebody figured out, well, that's X number of households, so if a town, I'm gonna make up numbers here, if
Yeah.
a township, so it takes 1,000 households, say to make the number of megawatts, obviously it'd be a lot more than that.
Right.
We have 100, so we have 100 houses, so we have to accommodate 10% of that. Again, making up numbers here that are not anywhere near reality. And you're saying, well, we've met that because we've covered 100 households. So it's someone figuring it all out and on a percentage basis.
Yes.
So I guess the question that I have is, I'm not trying to be argumentative by any means, but does that really hold any basis, legal basis for us to resist somebody? Or you're saying, our point would be, we would go to the state and say, hey, look, we've covered
We have
the
reasonably.
4% that we should be obligated for because we
Yes.
have X number of households. So it's trying to make our case to the state.
Yes, there's nothing in the current law
Okay.
that touches on this. It's kind of like a missing piece, and I think it's something that other townships and the law firm has glommed onto
Okay.
to basically, like, from a reasonable and logical perspective,
Right.
we've met our obligations. If it's, because to be fair, it shouldn't be on the shoulders of one community or 6 communities to
Right.
power the entire state,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, no, I completely agree,
Yeah.
because then the urban areas are gonna say, well, we don't have any open land, so
Right.
we're gonna go out into the rural communities they're gonna shoulder,
And that's what in effect
a
has
larger
happened.
proportion, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's what's happened to date. I think what you're seeing in more urban areas is the battery storage solutions, because they've got the buildings and an empty, maybe industrial space. But as far as wind and solar, it seems to the focus has been on the rural areas of the state. So yeah, I don't know, I mean, I don't think any of us know for certainty kind of the way the wind's gonna blow.
Anyone else have any thoughts or comments?
I like Laura's idea of simplicity.
Yeah, that's,
I mean, truly, I mean, the more complex you make things, you just end up going in a circle. And I think you're just better to, you know, I think we met the requirements here. As things change, then we maybe have to visit it, but I don't see this as a danger to our community that we need to be facing today.
And that was what I was thinking when I was thinking about these energy storage facilities. You know, I didn't want to create a third section, right? When really, in the state law, really the solar and the energy have the same parameters. And I thought, well, if they have the same parameters in state law, then they should be able to have the same parameters in our ordinance, right? As far as setbacks and all that, so.
And that's where you're talking about modifying 6.25
Right.
from large solar energy systems to large solar energy systems and energy storage facilities.
Yes, and the only changes to this section, we're adding where it says large solar, also putting an and energy storage facilities. So the same setback, same, all of the same requirements.
Okay.
I'm with Dan, keep it simple, keep it, have the basic stuff and.
I have to go with the expert, so.
Is everybody okay then with, let's talk about the accessory wind energy then for a second.
Okay.
So this is an ordinance that I've used, and it was very similar to the one, Wendy gave me, that Riley Township one. I mean, very, very similar. I used the one I was most familiar with, because I felt, I just was more familiar with it, and I thought it hit all the bases. So, really this is just for accessory components, that are on a minimum of 10 acres, and you have to be zoned AG or AR in order to have one of these. And so, there are limitations to, height, 80 feet is as tall as it can be. There's noise, shadow flicker, they have to write a whole bunch of information just to have even an accessory one on their property. So, I don't think, even if we get accessory ones, if it's on someone's, for someone's home, it's probably not gonna be 80 feet tall.
Right.
So, I think it would be very rare to see, something even this size here in the township.